As the door creaked open, Evelyn stepped into the house. A rush of emotion swept over her face. Her voice, laced with surprise and a hint of annoyance, echoed through the hallway. "Martin, what are you doing here?" she asked, her narrowed gaze locking onto me at the kitchen table. It was clear she hadn't expected to find me home so early. The tall, younger man standing behind her seemed to share her unease. He was well-dressed, his posture rigid, as though bracing for an impending confrontation. Evelyn, my wife of 30 years, still possessed a striking beauty that had captivated me from the very first moment I met her. Her chestnut hair cascaded in soft waves past her shoulders, framing her face exquisitely. She wore a pristine white blouse neatly tucked into a sleek black skirt, exuding elegance and professionalism. The blouse, unbuttoned at the top, revealed a hint of cleavage, an inadvertent nod to her enduring confidence and allure. In that fleeting moment, I was reminded of all the reasons I had fallen in love with her so many years ago. Without addressing the absurdity of her question, I replied dryly, "I live here." My response only sharpened her annoyance. She snapped back, "But why are you home at 3:30 in the afternoon?" Memories flooded my mind. Memories of the life we had built together, a life full of love and commitment. I often told people that I had fallen for Evelyn the moment I laid eyes on her during a business meeting years ago. She had been the administrative assistant, a perfect blend of charm and professionalism, and she captivated me instantly. By the end of that day, I had worked up the courage to ask her out, setting in motion the beautiful story of our lives together. The man behind her finally stepped forward. His sharp features betrayed a flicker of unease as he extended his hand. "Mr. Turner," he said, attempting to sound confident, "I'm Derek Wallace, a new attorney at Miller & Associates. I've been collaborating with Evelyn on some projects." I ignored his outstretched hand, keeping my gaze firmly locked on Evelyn. "I know exactly who and what you are," I said, my voice low and menacing. Evelyn flinched, a subtle crack appearing in her polished demeanor. "Why does he call you Evelyn in our home?" I demanded sharply. "You've always hated when people use your first name so casually. What's changed?" Her expression flickered with alarm and embarrassment. Evelyn had always prided herself on being in control, anticipating every detail of her life. But whatever scenario she and the so-called attorney had prepared for was unraveling before them. Taking a measured breath, I decided to break the tension. "Why don't I fix us some drinks? We can talk in the living room," I suggested. Evelyn, her voice quieter than usual, requested her customary glass of wine. Wallace hesitated, then muttered something about bourbon or craft beer that I nodded and left the room, keenly aware of their hurried whispers as I prepared the drinks. When I returned, I handed Evelyn her preferred Merlot and placed a dirty glass of beer in front of Wallace. Sitting down with my own bourbon, I raised my glass in a silent toast. Wallace took a tentative sip and grimaced. "This beer tastes strange," he remarked hesitantly. "It's Pabst Blue Ribbon," I said, amusement coloring my tone. His expression darkened, and Evelyn, noticing my smirk, snapped, "Isn't that the beer you always say is the worst thing you've ever tasted?" I chuckled, which only fueled her irritation. "You're such a jerk, Martin," she spat. "We came here to have a calm discussion, and all you've done is mock us." I met her gaze calmly. "You're right. Let's talk," I said evenly. "I'm sure I'll learn some valuable lessons about being a loving, respectful husband." My sarcasm cut deep. Evelyn visibly shrank under its weight. Wallace, emboldened by her silence, attempted to interject. "Martin, it's Mr. Turner to you," I interrupted coldly. "Or perhaps Honorable Sir. Take your pick." His face flushed crimson, and I turned back to Evelyn. "So, what is it you wanted to say?" Her frustration boiled over. "Your behavior is disgusting. Stop this right now." Feigning contemplation, I replied, "Do you really think my behavior is worse than yours has been these past 6 weeks?" The color drained from her face, and Wallace looked as though he had forgotten how to breathe. Their plan was crumbling before their eyes. Locking eyes with Evelyn, I delivered the final blow. What disgusts me more, the fact that you let this man touch you, or the way you've treated me like a fool? A heavy silence fell over the room, the undeniable truth hanging between us. In that moment, I realized their carefully crafted expectations had been utterly destroyed. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, and her voice dropped to a whisper. How could you possibly know? I have more allies in your workplace than you realize, I said evenly. 2 weeks ago, an anonymous letter arrived from one of your colleagues. It outlined your affair in detail and included 3 attachments. Photos of you and him at a picnic in Midwoods Park. The images showed you holding hands and kissing. Her face fell and she murmured, "I'm sorry you found out this way." Grasping for words, she faltered, but I cut her off. "Do you want a divorce?" I demanded. "No," she replied, leaning forward on the edge of the couch, her elbows propped on her knees. Her tone grew desperate. "I love you. I don't want a divorce. What Jacob and I have is just a fleeting distraction." She spoke quickly, almost frantically. "He's new here, struggling to make friends in Connecticut. Once he settles in and meets someone else, this will end. I swear, it's not serious." Her explanation left me cold. "That's not enough for me," I said, my voice firm. "When I married you, Evelyn, I believed we were committing to a monogamous, loving partnership," I said, my voice steady but cold. "Now, I see I was wrong. Divorce feels like the only option that aligns with my values." "Martin, no. Please don't do this," she pleaded, her voice cracking with desperation. "I don't want a divorce, and deep down, I don't think you do either. This was a one-time mistake, a momentary lapse. It's over now, and it won't happen again." Her voice wavered as she continued. "I was drawn to Derek. I needed something exciting in my life, but I promise it's done. I'll never stray again." I sipped my bourbon, allowing a heavy silence to settle between us before I responded. "Your promises mean nothing to me now. You've lied, and everyone knows it. You've shown yourself to be not only unfaithful, but shamelessly so." Her cheeks flushed with anger, but I pressed on. "Why should I believe this is the first time? For all I know, you've been doing this for years." Her voice shook as she tried to reason with me. "Martin, think about what we've built together. Kelly is married now, and we're finally at a point where we can slow down and enjoy retirement. This thing with Derek, it's nothing. It'll be forgotten soon enough." I rose from my seat and headed to the study, leaving my glass behind. When I returned, I found the 2 of them huddled on the couch, whispering as if conspiring. Derek looked up hesitantly and asked, "May I say something?" "Go ahead," I replied, my tone dripping with disdain. He took a deep breath before continuing. "Evelyn is right. This is nothing more than a brief affair. I deeply regret involving myself with a married woman, and it's not something I've ever done before. But we connected. She's an extraordinary person." I stared at him, my expression unreadable, before turning back to Evelyn. "Extraordinary? That's one way to put it," I said. Walking to the front door, I opened it and gestured for him to leave. "Lovely this time of year, isn't it?" I added, my tone flat. With that, I closed the door behind him, the sound echoing like a final judgment. Outside, the night was calm, indifferent to the storm I had unleashed inside. For the first time in months, I felt a weight lift from my chest, replaced by a cold clarity. Revenge wasn't sweet. It was bitter, raw, and hollow. But it was necessary. Some betrayals demand retribution, not for justice, but for survival. As I walked down the dimly lit street, I thought about the life I'd rebuild from the ruins they had left behind. And though the road ahead seemed uncertain, one thing was crystal clear. I was done being their fool.